'Tis a story of when love and loyalty end up colliding with the ultimate betrayal. And yes, it's the story of Xavi Hernandez as we knew already. We already had it pretty much signed and sealed as a deal. Not us, not here at this channel, but we as a community, we as a footballing group knew that basically the writing is on the wall. And of course, I spoke about it. You can check it out on the video here that I had put recently up. Xavi Hernandez ends up getting sacked. Xavi Hernández ends up getting sacked for being honest, for being sincere in his approach and how he sees his team. He's basically said, and he said it, of course, after the match against Almeria, saying, "This is what I have. No longer do I have, or I'm not a coach that's going to have the luxury of coaches 20 years ago." Of course, you start looking at right guard, even coaches before that, Louis Van Gaal, so and so, that had the luxury of saying, "I want this player, I want this player, I want this player." Xavi doesn't have that luxury. It's whoever comes, whoever's willing to come on a free transfer, whoever's available, whoever is willing to come with very little money being invested in them. Now, the salary ends up being a little bit different, but they still have restrictions. The economic situation hasn't gotten better, although many in social media will want you to think that Barcelona's, oh, things are getting much better at Barcelona. No, they're not. They're not. They're not getting better. And before, when Joan Laporta was elected, yours truly, amongst many others, were saying it's going to get worse before it gets better. And it's gotten worse before it's gotten better. Because keep in mind, Barcelona is a team that has to try and look for financial stability, while at the same time balancing it with being competitive. And whatever your definition of competitive, well, that's up to you. But they have to compete in the league, which means be able to be less than double digits away from the title, getting deep into the Champions League, which you could say they did. They got to quarters, and fighting for the Copa del Rey, which they kind of did. But kind of isn't enough. Kind of isn't enough for Joan Laporta. And as much as he believes that Barcelona is on the track back, that they have gotten back, that they're still one of the biggest teams in Europe, although if you start looking, no one really mentions Barcelona that much anymore. There isn't an appeal for Barcelona as it used to be at one point. And for obvious reasons, they don't have the star power. Yeah, Robert Lewandowski, but Robert Lewandowski of now isn't the Robert Lewandowski of Bayern Munich. Although he was the Pichichi last year, but that's kind of diminished. Joao Felix doesn't have the star power. There's really no one at Barcelona that you can go say, "Whoa, superstar." No, no. And of course, with Lewandowski, we don't know if he's staying. Most likely he's not. We'll see. But when it comes to the brand Barcelona, it's taken a huge hit because of the end. I mean, it's funny because in February 2000, Barcelona were about to become the first team to ever generate 1 billion euros in revenue in a season. First ever. But then, of course, COVID hit and that house of cards fell apart. But in that whole falling apart of issues and economic situations, we ended up seeing how things actually were at the club and how dire the situation really was. So much so that they left their idol out in the cold. And Joan Laporta had a lot to do with that too. At that point, you couldn't blame him. But as you see how things have operated, you kind of say, well, yeah. Now, there's no reason to mix the past with the present, although the past has a lot to do with the present. But when it comes to how the whole Xavi situation was handled, it was handled poorly, very poorly. Xavi didn't deserve to leave this way because Xavi was leaving anyway, only for Joan Laporta. Keep in mind, Joan Laporta was the same guy that, what was it, a few weeks ago, when Xavi did say he was coming back. He was on the verge of tears. He was emotional. He was, "Oh my God, I'm so happy you're coming back." He was like that. Let's not kid ourselves. And then Xavi went and said what he said, and then all of a sudden he ends up not wanting him around. which is the case. It's Laporta not wanting him around because out of everyone at Barcelona, Deco's not telling the truth. Rafa Just is not telling the truth. Anyone below them is not telling the truth. And sure as hell, Joan Laporta is not telling fans the truth. That's why you see a lot of people on social media believing what Joan Laporta is saying, because whatever he was thinking, whatever he did in the past, is kind of impacting the present. And you see how Laporta has been in recent years. Erratic has been the best word you could probably describe him as. There's no other way to say it. But Joan Laporta now, not very good in terms of leadership. And like I said, it's easy to be I mean, I didn't say it, but as the saying goes, it's easy to become a sailor. You know, you're never going to become a sailor when you're kind of sailing in calm waters. You're never going to be that. A president is seen in leadership roles when they're capable of handling certain things. And Laporta never did really have to, because at the end of the day, and many Barcelona presidents didn't have to. Bartomeu was one of them. Bartomeu found himself in the middle of a crisis, but everything gets papered over. The cracks end up getting papered over because Barcelona won the treble. And then, of course, everyone's like, well, Barcelona won the treble with Bartomeu. Bartomeu needs to get reelected. That was the only reason Bartomeu got reelected. And then, of course, they found out. And yet the same mistake was made with Laporta. We won a treble with Laporta. We might as well win it again. Oh, wait, there's no money. So what do we do? That's a big problem. And Barcelona, earlier today, as I mentioned, the usual suspects, Deco, Laporta, Rafa Juste, and there was a few others that met up with Xavi, ended up saying, you know what? Xavi, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. But it was already planned, folks. It was already planned. Why? Why do I say that? Because Deco ends up going to the Europa League final. What the hell does Deco have to do with the Europa League final? Well, as many do, seeing who's going to be available. Maybe you see if Deco going, Florian Wirtz is going, no. Or Gianluca Scamacca. Or Lookman, yeah. It's to be able to generate that. Maybe, just maybe, they find someone that's within their criteria, within their budget, and they do end up swooping along. I don't know. But in all that trip, he makes a pit stop and goes and talks to Hansi Flick, former German national team coach, former Bayern man. And he ends up saying, hey, would you like to coach Barcelona? And of course he says yes. And they make a pre-agreement, all behind Xavi's back, after Xavi had said yes, after Xavi had done everything, after Xavi had committed to the ongoing project. And now they have to pay him. Remember, before he resigned, so Barcelona at the end of the season didn't have to pay him a dime to leave. But now they do. So on top of having to pay Hansi Flick, which he will be announced on Monday, they'll have to pay Xavi as well, some type of money. I don't know how much. Maybe it's not what the $8 million that's going to be supposedly owed to him, but they'll probably negotiate some out clause where Xavi will end up getting paid something. But they're still going to have to pay it. And so for a team that find themselves in economic dire straits, to be able to spend money and have to spend it unnecessarily, well, ends up being kind of pointless, isn't it? But again, it comes down to Laporta's ego that ends up really harming Barcelona more than anything else. Because for Laporta, what Xavi said ends up being a knock on him, which is not true. It's not true that it's a knock on Laporta. It's basically the situation that the team is in, that the club is in. Barcelona can't afford high-end acquisitions like they used to at one point. They can't afford, because those same high-end acquisitions, the Dembélés, the Neymars, the you name it, those are part of the reason why Barcelona found themselves in the situation that they ended up being in, and of course the situation they are in now. So let's just be real with all of this. This is the reality of the situation. This is what Barcelona find themselves in. And now, yeah, you can still blame Bartomeu for a lot of things, but now 3 years in, that's all on Laporta. So with all that in mind, keep this very clear. Barcelona, and many have said this before, I said it especially after Laporta was elected, Barcelona are going to see things get worse before they get better. It seemed like they were getting out of it last year, but there were a lot of issues that were still around. Yeah, they won La Liga, but Real Madrid wasn't at their best. Atletico Madrid, again, underwhelmed. And at the end of the day, Barcelona did get eliminated from the Europa League. So that ends up being a very questionable situation there. Yeah, have they improved? Yeah, they have improved in certain facets, but it seems like that short blanket, if you pull it up, your legs are exposed, and if you pull it down, then of course everything up. That's basically it. You know, it's okay. Where do I find that happy balance in terms of Barcelona football wise? So it's all of that. It's again Laporta's ego, which seems that it's probably the most fragile thing at Barcelona. It's more fragile than Barcelona's economics, if you will. And where is this going to go? Because it was intelligent to not sack Xavi last week. There was a lot of report. There were a lot of reports that indicated that Xavi was going to be sacked last weekend, but it wouldn't have been smart now that you think about it, because sacking Xavi the day or two before a home match and seeing the response that fans gave at Montjuic, maybe not the most intelligent thing after all. But now this weekend they play at Sevilla, which ends up being a bit better because, of course, you're not going to have as much of a reprimand from fans. Maybe the traveling fans will protest or something, will express their displeasure with Laporta. But there could be one on Saturday when Barcelona's women's team ends up playing in the Champions League final. Could be. Now, I don't want that. To a certain extent, it does take, I mean, this news 24 hours before a final ends up taking a great deal away from that match. And it shouldn't. And it's not fair that it does, but it will, unfortunately. And you might see fans complaining. You might see fans protesting on that one too, for the sacking of Xavi, maybe, but also for sacking Xavi right before the final of a Champions League, which ends up taking the focus of where it should be at the club to somewhere where it shouldn't be at this particular moment. So that ends up being yet another strike against Joan Laporta. And now, mind you, if there's been something solid at Barcelona, it's been their women's football team. Because at basketball, they've had also their issues, their political struggles, and things of that nature as well. They've had their struggles in recent years. But again, it's Laporta. It all comes down to Laporta. Laporta's the one, and of course, everything will be looked at him because he's the head. He's the head. He's the face of this project. He's the face of this club. He's the face of this presidency, and he's the face of the administration. There are many others that are guilty. Many others. Deco, so far as a sporting director, has shown that he's not yet inept, but he's pretty much the level before, which is somewhere above incompetent and below capable. So he's somewhere mired in the middle. So 'tis the situation in Barcelona, folks. It's going to be an interesting summer for sure. We'll see how it works out. Again, folks, thanks so much. I'll talk to you very soon. Keep in mind, Copa America previews are coming. Keep in mind also that there will also be an attempt, or I'm considering, pondering the possibility of bringing back my podcast with interviews and things of that nature with people that, of course, would be enjoyable to listen to. That's number 2. AMAs next week. So make sure that you leave your questions, leave your comments, leave all types of feedback. I'd like to know what else you'd want me to talk about. And of course, like I said, for AMAs, leave your questions. I'd like to be able to answer them as best as possible. That amongst many other things that we're planning on doing here. So again, folks, talk to you soon. Until next time, ciao.